Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the emergent technologies with Web3, generative AI, and how that is going to impact game development as we know it. And I'm really lucky for the panelists I have with me today. I'd love it if you could just go through your introduction briefly. We have 20 minutes, so we got to be quick.
Yeah, so really quickly, I'm Miko. I'm with Gumi Cryptos Capital, super early stage investor, and we love stuff. We're early in OpenSea, Yield Guild games, so we're very passionate about gaming as well as Web3 blockchain.
I'm Andrew Boucher. I'm with Unity, and my focus is to support our Web3 and blockchain customers. So it's super exciting to be here at ETH Denver. Appreciate you guys coming to watch this panel.
I'm Scotty Fox, ML research engineer. I've worked with Intel Labs as well as a couple of others. Right now I've joined forces with Blockade Labs, where we look at the deep code behind how we can get to the next level of what gaming is going to be.
I'm JJ, the founder of Leonardo. We're a generative asset production or creation platform for gaming, both in the 2D and 3D space. Really excited to be here. Thanks.
Amazing. So I want to start with you, Andrew, because Unity had a really big announcement this week. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess Unity made an announcement that we're going to be in Web3. So I think everyone's probably been waiting for that for quite a while. Personally, I'm an NFT collector. I'm an admin for an NFT project. So this is pretty exciting for someone that works at Unity to be able to participate in Web3 with our customers. 13 new verified solutions partners on our Web3 asset store. We're going to continue to grow that, as you can probably imagine. That was our third-party announcement. We'll also have our own Unity tools that we'll be bringing to the asset store that are Unity-based products as well. So we're super excited about Web3 gaming, and what's to come for creators.
Amazing. Miko, I know you've been tracking the generative AI space, and with your background in gaming, what are you watching right now? What are you looking for? And also, I was going to ask, do you think is this going to unblock some of these ambitious metaverse creators that have been wanting to make super ambitious games with Web3, large games, lots of users? Is generative AI going to make that possible?
Yeah, so we're very interested in community-generated, UGC, user-generated content. And one of the things that this AI does is it fills what I call the UGC uncanny valley, right? So it's different from VR uncanny valley, which is that basically there's stuff that's easy to make, and then there's stuff that looks good, right? And those two things have never been further apart, right? Stuff that's easy to make and stuff that looks good have always been far apart, right? So we're super excited about stuff that's easy to make and looks good. That's going to be so powerful for user-owned IP and community-generated content, user-generated content. That's going to be, I think, a core of this entire metaverse experience.
Amazing. JJ, with Leonardo AI, I know that you're making game assets, but you're doing more than just game assets. I would like you to talk a little bit about that, but also what kind of users are you seeing? Are these Web3 builders or more traditional builders?
Yeah, so I guess the way that we're approaching the problem is really thinking about content creation in general, and that doesn't just mean gaming. It means there's a whole range of, I guess, entertainment verticals or narrative verticals that require content. And so we're really trying to, the way that we're thinking about the problem is about giving users more control with respect to generative AI, allowing people to really drive the creative process, and rather than it being a black box system where you put a text prompt in and you get something out, actually be able to sort of almost art direct the creation and finesse. And so I think that's really powerful across a whole range of use cases. And so the users that we're seeing on the platform really, we've got a lot of sort of indie developers through to like a lot of Web3 studios that are playing with the platform at the moment, and as well as a whole range of AI enthusiasts, which I think encompasses indie developers or people who've sort of been developers but maybe not necessarily had the artistic skill or the maybe the resources to obtain visual assets to create games. And so a lot of those people are now thinking, hey, I can build a game. And that's really exciting, thinking about the unlocking of sort of latent creative potential in a lot of people. So, yeah.
The new user. that we're talking about. Do you have any projections, not to put you on the spot, but do you have any projections about what that might look like?
I mean, I see the growth curve looking like this, so it looks great, I think.
Scotty, you've been developing in the VR space for the past year, and a lot of the work you've done has done real-time generations. I'm really curious about that work you've done, if you want to speak to it a little bit, but also, what do you think about the future of generative AI for real-time generations during gameplay?
Yeah, I'd love to speak on that. I'd have to agree with Miko earlier about how users are going to demand a higher resolution and more crisp graphics as time goes on, but that is very far away from real time. Because I can produce an image like this, but is it game ready? Not really. So that's kind of where I specialize in, is trying to get that to not an acceptable output, but something that actually is mind-blowing, that can not only keep up with modern games that are existing, but also displace them. I want to be able to look into different methods of getting that real-time integration by minimizing the footprint of what is needed in terms of technology to start making those games, making assets for games, or even reskinning a game in such a way that it is rigged to actually make the user experience flawless. Right now, there's a lot of hiccups and a lot of discontinuity that is happening within the game space, and that's what we're here to improve on. And we're doing it in a very short amount of time. I believe that in September, Stable Diffusion was able to become public and users were able to grab onto that. Within a couple of short months, people are looking at, can we make this into a game or maybe a music video? What can we really do? And now that the dust is settled and the users are starting to emerge at what they can really get their hands on, they're looking for these tools, and that's exactly where we come in. We're trying to provide those tools to keep up with that high fidelity, high quality that you would expect in games, not for 2017, but for 2030.
Thank you. So I know that Unity is looking at games that are interested in generative AI capabilities. How do you plan to support these sort of new developers? Because it's hard to find these tools, specifically for everyone's individual needs and use cases.
I think it's a good question. So Unity is a company that's enabling creators, and so a lot of our creators are making these tools. So we have a pretty strong passion not to compete with our customers. And so on this topic, I think Unity is going to obviously explore our own technologies, but at the same time, we're going to have really strong partnerships with companies that provide these technologies. And I think what's interesting is we have to continue to think about what customer need is. So not every AI solution is going to be aligned with that specific customer need. And so our marketplace, our asset store, will continue to be a part of that story in addition to what Unity is developing in-house. But again, we're here to enable creators and companies that are creating this technology as well.
All right, so this question is for the entire panel, so we'll just go through. But I'd like to know what you think about the concept of text to game. And what does that mean to you? And then also, what do you think the timeline is for that?
So, I think text to game is absolutely going to happen, right? I think it's really exciting, right? In a sense, like, there already is a text to game environment. It's called Dungeons and Dragons, right? But I think what you're talking about is text to kind of fully realized, like 3D rendered, spectacular video game, Elden Ring style, right? So like, obviously we've got a little ways to go before we get there, right? But I think the idea that comes out of Dungeons and Dragons is the idea of kind of like this collaborative creativity and this kind of incredibly dynamic form of fun, and as we know, in the COVID pandemic, Dungeons and Dragons just like exploded, right? So people love this and they love the interaction and the dynamism. So I think that, in terms of when will it happen, 6-7 years maybe.
So I'm not a developer, but I will give a point of view, I guess. So I look at this a little bit like an evolution maybe of visual scripting. And so before we make video games, you'd have to do all the coding. And now we have tools that allow you to drag and drop a lot of those elements into place. And I see text to game as an evolution of visual scripting, candidly.
So I would have to say that text to game is probably a lot closer around the corner than what one might think. If you look about a year back in time, there's just silence. Within the last couple of months, we're seeing all these people emerging that are experimenting with little mini games and assets that they can build. And that's just from the user's first experience with getting something to text or idea or dream into game. The future holds something like, hey, I want to play Super Mario, but as a first-person shooter, type it, and there it is. It populates everything. Not only the images, but maybe the way that the dungeon crawler is mapped out. The very pathfinding, maybe the RPG, maybe even what kind of loot crates to put into your game. It's not only restricted to imagery. Within this last month, we've seen even more growth with this, and the product that we just launched recently is actually getting into users' hands very, very rapidly. So I would say that it's time to think about a 3 to 5 year plan, not a 10-year.
Yeah, I would agree. A 3 to 5 year plan sounds reasonable, especially considering just how rapidly the space is evolving. I mean, it was only, maybe a year ago that Midjourney came out. And then from there, we've just seen this rapid movement. But I think one interesting point that maybe I want to touch on, I think, is thinking about the role of creators in the context of text to game. And maybe just to think about how do we see that future? Do we want it to be entirely user-driven, or do we want to sort of think about maybe sort of more curated experiences and then text to game within that sort of context or that framework? Because I feel like if we really want to get broad-based adoption by creators, we need to keep creators at the center of that sort of process. Yeah.
So one more question. We're getting low on time. But for the Web3 developers in the audience, what is one piece of advice you would give them if they have the ambition to make a game, and with the existing tooling that we have available to us, what's a creative idea of how to leverage them to create a game without spending years and resources on game development to achieve an idea?
So I'm a venture investor. My partner actually did an IPO for a $1 billion game company in Japan. So like, if you're a Web3 developer, from the lens of venture capital, my advice to you would be don't make games except for fun, right? So in other words, if you plan to make a mega hit game, I think it's difficult. Like, it's a super hard industry. It's super brutal. And so I would say run in the opposite direction. You know, spend the time you would have spent on that actually playing games and having an awesome time.
I don't know if I understood the question properly.
If there's an approach a Web3 developer could easily ship a game without having to have the traditional struggles that we see in like the traditional game space, developing with the emergent technology of Web3 can be very difficult because it's still developing in real time. So you're working with something that's moving under your feet.
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I think let's take it back to the AI piece. When I think it's not specific to Web3, but it can certainly enable Web3 companies who are generally less resources available to them. So this idea of using AI to ideate, to get ideas, to check code and these sorts of things, I think that's a way to get to market much more quickly with less resources. Obviously that can be Web 2 or Web 3, but it seems like Web 3 resources are less.
So I believe that there's still a block in between where AI exists and what Web3 developers would be seeking. And that block happens to be what it is to collect data, to use that data, and to use it moving forward with AI. Some of the processes that are about to emerge very, very shortly are actually going to combine a lot of community with the data set that you creators actually make, which will improve the experience of what it is to be the developer. So something for the first time that's going to happen is there's going to be an incredible amount of community influx, and you're going to have a lot of adjacent neighbors also helping develop this one future goal.
Yeah, I think that, Web3 studios tend to be more resource limited than traditional Web 2. And so I think leveraging generative AI obviously is sort of a great leveler potentially in terms of democratizing asset production and creation. So I think that's one aspect to it, but also the other part is really user-generated content and the ability to really open the doors to users creating sort of game-ready assets, I think is really powerful for Web3 as well.
All right, guys, we're out of time. But thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your ETH Denver.
Thank you.